The room felt suffocatingly quiet, and I was trying to focus on the quiet hum of the machines around me when everything changed in an instant. My thoughts were interrupted by the door creaking open. My husband stepped into the room, his expression cold and demanding, and before I could react, he was standing over me. He raised his hand, and in one swift motion, he slapped me so hard that pain exploded across my face. As I tried to breathe through it, I realized this was no longer just about control, it was about something far worse. My name is Lena Whitmore, and I am 34 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago what my life would look like today, I would have painted a picture of success, stability, and happiness. I would have told you that I was running my father's business, building a strong legacy, and living the life I had always dreamed of. But reality had other plans for me. Instead of standing at the top of my career, I found myself trapped in a marriage that felt more like a business contract than a partnership. Instead of being surrounded by love and support, I was surrounded by manipulation and control. And instead of feeling free, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I wasn't always this way. I wasn't always afraid of what tomorrow might bring. I was strong once, independent, ambitious, and I still am. This is my story. It's the story of how I fell in love, how I ignored the warning signs, and how I found myself married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a key to power and wealth. It's the story of lies, betrayal, and greed. But most importantly, it's the story of how I took back my life, piece by piece. And it all started with him, Victor. I met Victor Calloway on a warm spring evening at a charity gala in Ridgeview, a small but wealthy city where business elites gathered to expand their networks. At the time, I was too focused on my career to even think about love, but fate had a way of pulling me into situations I never expected. Victor was charming, confident, and effortlessly charismatic. He had a way of making people feel like they were the only person in the room when he spoke to them. That night, when he walked up to me, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit and flashing a smile that could melt anyone's guard, I let myself be drawn in. "You must be Lena Whitmore," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "I've heard about your work. Your father built an incredible business, and I can see his sharp mind runs in the family." I should have been more cautious. But back then, his words felt like a compliment, not a strategy. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Victor told me he was an entrepreneur, always looking for the next big investment. He made it seem like he admired me, not just for my family's success, but for who I was as a person. I should have known better. By the end of the night, he had me intrigued. He was different from the men I had met before, bold, driven, and ambitious. When he asked me for my number, I hesitated for only a moment before giving it to him. From that night forward, he didn't waste any time. Victor was persistent, but never overbearing. He took me on extravagant dates, private dinners at the finest restaurants, weekend getaways to hidden resorts, and spontaneous surprises that made me feel like I was living in a fairy tale. He always made sure I felt wanted, cherished, and protected. But looking back, I realized that it wasn't love. It was a carefully crafted illusion, one designed to make me fall so deep that I wouldn't notice when the walls started closing in. I thought I had met my perfect match, but what I had really met was my biggest mistake. Falling for Victor felt effortless. Within just a few months, our relationship became intense and all-consuming. He was the kind of man who knew how to make a woman feel special. He said all the right things, showed up at all the right times, and gave me just enough attention to keep me completely hooked. I had never felt so adored before. He would bring me flowers for no reason, leave me sweet handwritten notes, and talk about our future together like it was already written in the stars. I should have questioned how quickly things were moving, but back then, I was too blinded by love to see the warning signs. Victor proposed on a rooftop in New York City, under the soft glow of city lights, with a diamond ring so perfect it looked unreal. It should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. Instead, I remember feeling something strange in my gut, something I couldn't explain. Doubt. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. Or at least I thought I did. But something deep inside me whispered that this was too easy, too perfect. But I ignored it. I said yes. At first, marriage felt like an extension of our fairy tale romance. We bought a beautiful home in Ridgeview, and Victor acted like the perfect husband. He told me how lucky he was to have me, how we were going to build an incredible future together. But slowly, things started to change. Victor became less patient, more critical. Small things that never seemed to bother him before suddenly became issues. If I didn't answer his calls immediately, he accused me of ignoring him. If I spent too much time working, he would say I was neglecting our marriage. If I disagreed with him, he would make me feel like I was being unreasonable. And then came his mother, Judith. From the moment I married Victor, she made it very clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. She never said it outright, but the judgment in her eyes and the passive-aggressive remarks said enough. "She's too busy with her business," Judith once told Victor while I was sitting right there. "A wife should be focused on her husband, not playing CEO." Victor didn't defend me. He just sat there in silence, letting her words hang in the air. That's when I realized I was alone in this marriage. As the months went by, Victor started asking more questions about my father's business. "How much control do you have over the company? Have you ever thought about restructuring ownership? Maybe it would be easier if we managed things together." At first, I thought he was just being supportive. But then the questions turned into suggestions. "If you put my name on the company, I could help take some of the stress off your plate. Lena, handling everything on your own is too much for one person. You should let me take over some responsibilities. Marriage is about trust. Don't you trust me enough to make these decisions with you?" That last sentence made my stomach turn. It wasn't about trust. It was about control. That's when I knew I could never tell him about my 80% ownership in the company. If he ever found out, I would lose everything. And for the first time since I met Victor, I started feeling afraid. I still remember the day my father, Richard Whitmore, sat me down in his office, a warm but serious look in his eyes. "Lena," he said, handing me a thick folder, "this company is my legacy, but more than that, it's yours now." I hesitated, looking at the papers in front of me. Ownership transfer documents. A will. Business records. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He smiled. "I built this company from the ground up, and I want to make sure it stays in the right hands. You've always had the business sense, the intelligence, and the heart to run it better than anyone." That's when he told me the truth. I owned 80% of Whitmore Enterprises. The remaining 20% was divided among longtime board members who had been with my father for decades. He made sure I had complete control over decisions, making it impossible for anyone, including a future spouse, to take it from me. It was his way of protecting me. At the time, I didn't fully grasp the weight of what he had done. I was still young, still trying to find my own path in life. But I trusted my father. If he believed I could handle this responsibility, then I had to believe it too. After his passing, I honored his wishes by running the company carefully, making smart decisions, and keeping his legacy alive. I told no one about the full extent of my ownership, not even Victor. It wasn't just about protecting the business. It was about protecting myself. After we got married, Victor became more curious about my business. At first, I thought nothing of it. After all, it made sense for a husband to be interested in his wife's career. But as time went on, his questions became more direct, more insistent. "Who actually owns the company? Do you have full control over decisions? Do you think it's fair to handle this all alone?" I knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted leverage, a way to position himself into my world, a reason to demand access to something that had never been his. So I lied. I told him I was just one of many shareholders, that I had influence but not full control. I let him believe that my position in the company wasn't strong enough to make major decisions alone. He seemed to accept it. For a while, at least. I kept my father's will and ownership documents locked away in a private drawer in my home office. I rarely looked at them, but just knowing they were there gave me a sense of security. Until the night Victor found them. I had been working late in the living room, lost in reports, when I realized Victor had been upstairs in my office for far too long. A strange feeling settled in my chest, a whisper of unease I couldn't shake. I walked upstairs and saw the door slightly open, the warm glow of my desk lamp spilling into the hallway. And then I saw him. Victor stood behind my desk, holding my father's will in his hands. His expression was unreadable at first, but as his eyes met mine, I saw it. Anger, betrayal, greed. "You lied to me," he said, his voice low but sharp, like the edge of a knife. I felt my breath hitch. "Victor, put those papers down." He didn't move. Instead, he lifted the front page of the will, his finger tracing over the words. 80%. His voice was almost a whisper, but it was filled with disbelief. I said nothing. $12 million? His grip on the papers tightened. "You've had this much control all along and you never told me?" "Because I knew this is exactly how you'd react," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. His jaw tightened. He took a slow step toward me, his eyes filled with something dark, something possessive. "You don't deserve to run a company like this," he muttered. "You're too emotional. Too soft." He slapped the will onto the desk. "You will sign the shares over to me," he said, his tone cold and commanding. I lifted my chin. Over my dead body. Victor's nostrils flared, and for a second I thought he might actually hit me right then and there. But instead, he let out a low, humorless laugh. "You're making a mistake, Lena," he said. "One way or another, you're going to realize that." With that, he turned and stormed out of the office, leaving me alone with my pounding heart and the terrifying realization that my life was about to change forever. After that night, everything changed. Victor no longer tried to hide his intentions. The moment he learned about my 80% ownership, his attitude toward me shifted completely. At first, he tried to play it off casually, as if his discovery didn't bother him. He acted like nothing had changed, bringing me coffee in the mornings, kissing me on the forehead, and pretending that we were just another happily married couple. But I could see through it. There was a new edge to his voice, a sharpness in his words that hadn't been there before. He had always been charming, persuasive, but now it felt more like manipulation. And then the demands began. Every day, Victor found new ways to bring up my shares, pretending that he was concerned for my well-being. "You already have too much on your plate, Lena," he would say over breakfast. "Running a company this big is exhausting. You shouldn't have to do it alone." At night, when we lay in bed, he would turn to me, his voice soft and coaxing. "If you put my name on the company, we can work as a team. You trust me, don't you?" I always had the same answer. No. The more I refused, the more aggressive he became. At dinners, he would criticize my leadership. "You're not making smart decisions, Lena. You're too emotionally attached to this business." When I worked late, he would accuse me of neglecting him. "Is this company more important than our marriage?" He started questioning my intelligence. "You don't have the experience to run something this big. You're going to ruin everything your father built." I could see the frustration building in his eyes every time I refused. And then he started making threats. Victor knew exactly how to play mind games. One evening, after yet another argument about the shares, he leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. "You know, Lena," he said, swirling his whiskey in his glass, "if something ever happened to you, what do you think would happen to your shares?" I froze. He chuckled. "Relax. I'm just saying you need a contingency plan. If you're not around, the company goes into uncertainty. Wouldn't it be easier if I was legally in charge?" For the first time, I felt real fear creep into my chest. That night, I locked my office door. The more desperate he became, the worse things got. He demanded access to my financial records. He insisted on attending business meetings with me, claiming he wanted to help. He even tried convincing board members that I was too stressed to handle leadership alone. But the worst part? He wasn't just after power, he wanted to own me. "You're my wife, Lena," he snapped one night when I refused to sign the transfer documents. "What's yours should be ours." But I wasn't his property, and I would never let him take what was mine. One evening, I returned home late from a business dinner and found Victor in my office again. This time, he wasn't just reading my documents. He had a stack of papers in front of him, already prepared. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "You're signing these tonight," he said coldly, sliding the papers toward me. I picked them up and scanned them quickly. Stock transfer agreement. If I signed, he would become the majority owner of Whitmore Enterprises. I felt my stomach twist. "Victor, this isn't happening," he sighed, rubbing his temples like I was being difficult on purpose. "Lena, why are you making this so hard? This is for us." I shook my head. "No, this is for you. And you know it." His eyes darkened. "You're really going to make me force your hand, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out of the room. That night, I barely slept. I knew one thing for sure. Victor wasn't going to stop. And if I didn't get away from him soon, he was going to destroy me. I woke up to the sound of buzzing. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt a sharp, stinging pain on my cheek. My eyes shot open just in time to see a swarm of stable flies hovering over me, their dark bodies moving in erratic patterns, their tiny wings filling the air with a relentless hum. I barely had time to react before another sharp sting hit me, this time on my forehead. Then another, and another. Pain spread across my face like fire. I scrambled out of bed, my hands swatting at the air as I rushed toward the mirror. The reflection that stared back at me made my stomach drop. My face was swelling fast. Red, inflamed bumps had already started forming where the flies had bitten me, my skin reacting violently to their venom. The pain was unlike anything I had ever felt before, burning, throbbing, unbearable. I staggered toward the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, but nothing helped. My vision blurred from the swelling around my eyes. My lips felt 3 times their normal size, and the skin along my jawline had started to harden and scar. I needed a hospital. Immediately. I rushed out of the bathroom, nearly tripping over myself as I called for Victor. I needed him to take me to the ER. But when I found him, sitting in the living room, he didn't even bother to stand up. He barely glanced at me before returning his focus to his laptop. "Victor," I gasped, gripping the doorway for support. "I need to go to the hospital." I was bitten, my face, He let out a sigh, finally looking at me. His expression? Completely indifferent. "You should be more careful," he muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. My heart stopped. I was in excruciating pain, my face swelling by the second, and he was acting like this was an inconvenience to him. "Victor, I'm serious," I said, my voice trembling. "Please take me to the hospital." He stood up slowly, placing his coffee cup down with deliberate ease. "I will," he said, walking toward me. "On one condition." Then, he pulled a stack of papers from the coffee table, the same stock transfer agreement he had been shoving in my face for weeks. "Sign the shares over to me," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "And I'll take you to the hospital." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. But when I looked into his cold, calculating eyes, I knew I hadn't. He was serious. I felt the world tilt around me. My face was on fire, my skin tightening with each passing second, and here he was, using my pain to get what he wanted. I could barely speak. "Victor, you can't be serious." He stepped closer. "You're in no position to argue, Lena. Just sign the damn papers."
No.
Even through the pain, through the swelling and the dizziness, I refused to let him win. I turned away from him, grabbing my phone with trembling hands and scrolling through my contacts. My vision was blurry, but I didn't care. I just needed to find one name. Luke Everett. My old friend. The one person I knew I could still trust. I hit the call button, praying he would answer. 2 rings. 3. Then his voice. "Lena." Luke's voice was filled with surprise, but the moment he heard me struggling to breathe, his tone changed. "Lena, what's wrong?" I could barely get the words out. Hospital. I need help." That was all he needed to hear. "I'm on my way." Victor's expression darkened as I lowered the phone. "Who the hell did you just call?" "Not you, that's for damn sure." I didn't answer, because I knew help was coming. And Victor was about to lose the control he thought he had over me. The drive to the hospital felt like a fever dream. Luke had arrived within minutes of my call, his worry evident the moment he saw me. I barely had the strength to walk, my face swollen beyond recognition, my skin burning like it was on fire. Without hesitation, he helped me into his car, driving like a man on a mission. "You're going to be okay," he assured me, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "We're almost there." I wanted to thank him, but the pain was too intense. Every movement sent sharp throbs through my jaw, my cheeks, my temples. My vision blurred from the swelling, and my breaths came in short, desperate gasps. All I could think about was Victor. How he had refused to help me. How he had tried to use my suffering as leverage. And worst of all, he didn't care. I had spent so long making excuses for him, believing that maybe, deep down, he still loved me. But now I saw the truth. Victor never loved me. He only loved what he could take from me. The doctors rushed me into emergency treatment the moment we arrived. The bites from the stable flies had triggered a severe allergic reaction, causing extensive swelling and inflammation. My face was nearly unrecognizable, my skin scarred from the venom. They administered pain relief, antihistamines, and steroids, doing everything they could to bring the swelling down. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the medication making me drowsy and disoriented. But through it all, one thing remained the same. Luke never left my side. He stayed in my hospital room, making sure I had everything I needed: water, food, updates from the doctors. He handled insurance paperwork, spoke to the nurses, and even made sure my business associates were notified of my condition. And Victor? He was nowhere to be found. Days passed, and my condition slowly stabilized. The swelling went down, but the scars remained, a painful reminder of what had happened. Still, Victor never called, never visited, never even checked in. And strangely, I wasn't surprised. But Luke? He was always there. I had known him for years. We had met in college, back when I still believed in dreams and possibilities. He had always been steady, reliable, kind. We had lost touch over time, but the moment I needed him, he had shown up without hesitation. One evening, as he sat beside my hospital bed, he looked at me carefully. "You haven't said much about Victor." I let out a bitter laugh. "Because there's nothing to say." Luke didn't press further, but I could tell he already knew. He had always been able to read me. I turned to him, hesitating before speaking. "Thank you, Luke. For everything." His expression softened. "You don't have to thank me, Lena. You just have to promise me one thing." "What?" He leaned forward slightly, holding my gaze. "Don't go back to him." I swallowed hard. I didn't plan to. But I had no idea that the final confrontation was just around the corner. The night was quiet. The only sounds in my hospital room were the soft beeping of the heart monitor and the distant murmur of nurses talking in the hallway. Luke had stepped out to get some medicine for me, leaving me alone for the first time since I had been admitted. I should have felt safe. But the moment the door creaked open, I knew something was wrong. I turned my head slowly, my heart stopping when I saw Victor standing in the doorway. His dark eyes swept over me, taking in the bruises, the swelling that still hadn't completely gone down. But there was no concern in his expression. No remorse. No shock at seeing the damage done to my face. Just cold calculation. "You look awful," he muttered, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. I gritted my teeth. "What are you doing here, Victor?" He walked toward my bed, his movements slow and deliberate. "I came to give you one last chance, Lena." Then, he reached into his black leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal documents, the same ones he had been shoving in my face for weeks. "The stock transfer papers." "I'm done playing games," he said, his voice low and sharp. "You're signing these. Now." I stared at him, feeling a slow, simmering rage rise in my chest. Even now, after everything, after leaving me to suffer, after refusing to take me to the hospital unless I signed away my company, he still had the audacity to demand this from me. "I already told you, Victor," I said, my voice unwavering. "I will never sign those papers." His jaw clenched. I saw the anger flash in his eyes, his carefully crafted mask beginning to crack. "This isn't just about you, Lena," he hissed. "You don't know how to run a business. You're ruining everything. The board will lose confidence in you. You're going to drive Whitmore Enterprises into the ground. I scoffed, my lips curling into a smirk despite the pain. You don't give a damn about the company, I said. You just want power. But here's the thing, Victor. You will never have it. And that's when he snapped. Before I could react, his hand swung through the air and struck my swollen face. A sharp, searing pain exploded across my cheek, making me gasp in agony. My head snapped to the side, and I felt tears sting my eyes from the sheer force of it. The world spun for a second, the shock numbing me before the pain slammed into my nerves like a tidal wave. I heard myself let out a strangled scream, my body recoiling instinctively. Then, the door burst open. Hey, get away from her. A nurse's horrified voice rang through the room as she rushed inside, followed by a security guard. Victor barely had time to react before the guard grabbed him by the arm and shoved him backward. What the hell are you doing? The guard shouted. Victor struggled, his face contorted with fury. This is my wife. This is a private matters. No, Victor, I rasped, my voice hoarse from pain. I wiped the blood from the corner of my lip, my body shaking. Not anymore. At that moment, 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room, their eyes narrowing at Victor. The hospital reported an assault, one of them said. Sir, we need you to step away from her. Victor's eyes widened for a brief second before his usual arrogance returned. This is ridiculous, he said, laughing bitterly. She's my wife. This is just a misunderstanding. I met his gaze, my expression cold, unforgiving. This is assault, coercion, and manipulation, I corrected. And I will make sure you pay for every second of it. The officer nodded. Mr. Calloway, you're under arrest for domestic assault and financial coercion. Victor lunged toward me, but the guard held him back as the officers grabbed his arms and forced him into handcuffs. You're making a mistake, Lena, he shouted as they dragged him toward the door. You're going to regret this. You hear me? This isn't over. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, watching as they hauled my biggest mistake out of my life for good. As soon as the door shut behind them, I let out a shaky breath, my hands trembling. Then, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. Lena? I turned my head to see Luke standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with both anger and concern. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, he walked toward me and carefully, tenderly, he reached out and brushed his thumb over my bruised cheek, his touch feather-light. Did he do this to you? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I nodded. But it's over now. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might go after Victor himself. But instead, he exhaled, his shoulders relaxing just a little. Yeah, he said softly. It is. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The next few days were a blur of hospital paperwork, police reports, and legal meetings. Victor's arrest made headlines in Ridgeview. A well-known businessman charged with domestic assault, financial coercion, and attempted fraud. It was the kind of scandal that people whispered about in coffee shops and boardrooms. But I didn't care about the gossip. I cared about justice. With Luke by my side, I met with my lawyer, Eleanor Grayson, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had been handling my family's business affairs for years. When I told her everything, how Victor had been trying to steal my company, how he refused to help me when I needed medical attention, how he finally resorted to violence, her expression turned to steel. This isn't just about domestic violence, Lena, she said, flipping through Victor's financial records. This is an orchestrated attempt at corporate fraud and asset control. He didn't just want to control you, he wanted to control everything. I nodded. I want the strictest punishment possible. Eleanor smiled. Good. Because with this evidence, we're going to bury him. Victor tried everything to save himself. His lawyers argued that the slap was a moment of frustration, that his attempts to take control of my business were just misguided attempts to help, that I was exaggerating my injuries and trauma. But Eleanor was relentless. She presented hospital records, witness statements from the nurses and security guard, and financial documents proving his coercion attempts. Then came the final blow, the security footage from the hospital hallway. A clear recording of Victor slapping me across the face, sending me reeling in pain. The courtroom fell into complete silence as the footage played. Victor's smirk disappeared. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The judge didn't hesitate. Victor was found guilty on multiple charges: domestic assault, financial coercion, and attempted fraud. His sentence? 5 years in prison, along with a massive financial penalty. The moment the gavel struck, relief flooded through me. It was over. Victor's conviction made the divorce process swift and brutal. He tried to fight for assets, but with a felony conviction, he had no leverage. I got everything: the house, my personal wealth, and most importantly, Whitmore Enterprises remained 100% mine. The moment I signed the final divorce papers, I felt lighter than I had in years. Victor was nothing but a bad memory now. I was free. Through everything, Luke never left my side. He had seen me at my lowest, but instead of treating me like a victim, he reminded me of who I really was: strong, capable, and worthy of love. One evening, a few months after the trial, we sat on the balcony of my new home, watching the sun set over the Ridgeview skyline. "You're different now," Luke said, studying me. I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" He smiled. "You look happy. Like you finally got yourself back." I looked at him, really looked at him. He had been my rock, my safe place. I had spent so long trapped in fear, but with him, I felt safe, valued, and loved in a way I had never experienced before. And suddenly, I knew. I didn't just trust him. I loved him. As if he could read my mind, he reached for my hand, his fingers gently intertwining with mine. "I need to ask you something," he said. My heart pounded. "What is it?" He exhaled, then turned to me with nothing but love in his eyes. "Marry me." Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain or fear. They were from happiness. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Yes. I had lost so much, but I had gained something greater: a life that was truly mine. I was no longer trapped in the shadows of an abusive marriage. I was stronger, wiser, and happier than ever before. And as I stood beside Luke on our wedding day, looking into his warm, steady eyes, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free.